What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Wildcast podcast. I am Justin Spears, Arizona football beat writer, here with Micah Lev, senior writer and columnist. We're going to be talking a lot of Arizona versus TCU football, big-time matchup in Fort Worth between the Wildcats and the Horned Frogs. We're also going to have our Big 12 picks later on in the podcast for Big 12 Bonanza. And before we get into it, make sure you subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast on Apple and Spotify, and now YouTube Music and other podcasting platforms. And for the video version of this episode, go find it on Tucson.com. It's also going to be attached to a lot of our stories leading up to the game too. So you can read and watch and listen to all of our coverage of this Arizona versus TCU game. And hey, we also got a big time basketball game. Lev, you're going to be there at McKale Center on Friday night, Arizona versus Duke. Cooper Flagg and company, one of the top teams in college basketball. We were supposed to get a top 10 matchup, but we'll have to settle for top 20, Lev, because both teams losing in the last week, with Duke obviously losing to Kirk Kriisa and the Kentucky Wildcats, and then Arizona losing to Wisconsin on the road. But, man, fun one at McKale Center. First time Duke has been to McKale since 1991. When the Blue Devils lost to the Wildcats in double overtime, thanks to Mr. Matt Muehlbach for being clutch down the stretch. But, man, Arizona versus Duke, enjoy it while you can, because I'm not sure when the next time you'll see a program like Duke in a non-conference setting come out to McKale Center.
Yeah, it's a very big deal. And these types of matchups are becoming increasingly rare. Bruce Pascoe wrote a story about this, and it's kind of tied to the NIL era, as well as just the predominance of television and making a lot of these decisions. They're just shifting a lot of these marquee matchups to neutral sites, and there's a lot of financial incentive in it for the programs and even the players. They're compensated in a lot of these cases when they have these big, neutral site events, or these multiple team events, like the one Arizona is going to play in next week in the Bahamas. So cherish it, enjoy it. It's going to be a special night, late night, fun night at McKale Center.
Before we talk Arizona TCU, Lev, when you think about Arizona basketball's personnel right now, who is the Cooper Flagg stopper? Because this guy leads Duke in points, rebounds, steals, blocks, I think assists too. Like, this guy leads every statistical category for Duke, if I'm not mistaken. So with such an active big guy like Cooper Flagg, because he's got size, he's a post player, he's a forward, with his length, with his athleticism, his willingness to really go out and spread the floor and make all the plays, who do you put on a guy like that if you're Arizona? Is it Carter Bryant? Do you go smaller with a guy like KJ Lewis? Maybe Toby Awaka, Trey Townsend? Like, there's a number of guys, but I'm trying to figure out, like, who's going to be the number one guy that Tommy's going to lean on to limit Cooper Flagg on Friday.
Yeah, I think the best way to go about it is to not lean on one guy. It's got to be a group effort. Trey Townsend, just in terms of his body, is the first one that jumps to mind. But I could also see KJ Lewis defending Cooper Flagg and just trying to get really physical with him, getting into his space, if you will, harassing him all over the court. Obviously, Cooper Flagg is bigger than KJ. He's about 6'8", whereas KJ is maybe 6'4", 6'5". But we've seen KJ defend players of all dimensions. He's always a high effort guy. So that's the way I would go about it. The message to me would be, we don't have a Cooper Flagg stopper, like nobody does, but we have several guys who conceivably could team up to at least slow him down a little bit and just make things difficult for him.
Yeah. McKale Center is going to be rocking. Can't wait to watch that game from Dallas, where I'll be getting ready to cover the Arizona versus TCU game. Lev, I'm not sure how to feel about this game. Right now, Vegas has it at 11.5 points. Is that our final spread for Big 12 Bonanza, 11.5?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so right now, the Wildcats are 2-possession dogs for this game. Arizona has not done well on the road outside of their game against the Utah Utes. The Wildcats have gotten blown out in every single game, with UCF most recently in the space game, losing to them by 44 points. They also got smoked by Kansas State earlier in the year, and they also got killed by BYU, which has a really big game against ASU this week. But Arizona has not done well on the road, but this is also a desperate Arizona team that is trying to keep their bowl hopes alive. They're on the road. Can they pull off the win over TCU? Now, they don't have the bye week. The last road win, they had extra time to prepare for Utah, and they were able to get it done. Now they got to, after a win over Houston, they got to go on the road, play against a high-powered TCU offense that is number one in the Big 12 in passing, one of the top passing units in all of college football. They have 3 wide receivers that are in the top 21 in terms of receiving in the conference this year. So Arizona's defense will be tested. I still don't know how I'm going to pick this game. Of course, I'm going to have to make my decision at the end of this podcast, Lev, but it's really challenging trying to handicap this game. And because I think Arizona can win, but I can also see TCU blowing the doors off.
I can too. It'll be senior day for TCU, so there's going to be an added emotional component. I'm sure it'll be a packed house. Arizona just hasn't handled these situations very well, aside from Utah, which has proved to be a much lesser team than we thought at the time. They haven't won a game since losing to Arizona, which is a crazy thing to say. To me, the most important thing, and this will probably be the lead item in my Levitt on the Field column this week, is Arizona needs to show up for this game. Like, you cannot have a no-show a la UCF, where they just were not competitive from the jump, right? We need to see toughness, effort, mental toughness, right? As much as physical toughness. I think getting off to a good start is really important. I think running the ball is really important. That's probably TCU's biggest vulnerability. You can run the ball against them. I'm doing cat stats this week on Arizona's running game, and I discovered something that just shocked me, Justin. If you take sacks out of the equation, sacks are baked into the formula for net rushing yards in college football, right? Take sacks out. Arizona has more rushing yards per game and a higher average per carry this season than last season.
Wow.
Just with running the ball, with running backs, wide receivers, etc. I know. I double checked. I'm like, this doesn't seem right, but they've had more lost yardage to sacks through 10 games than they had through 13 games last year. So it kind of makes sense in that respect. And they've also, been in a lot of games where they couldn't run the ball because they were behind by so much. So to me, this is really about controlling the game, controlling the tempo, forcing TCU to play on your terms rather than playing on their terms.
Yeah. Well, in TCU, I was actually talking with their folks in Fort Worth. They had me on their podcast. And while it looks like Arizona is going to really run the ball effectively because they have a really good passing defense, but this could also be a big game for Tetairoa McMillan and Chris Hunter, because apparently TCU's passing defense is fool's gold. Like, if you look at TCU's schedule this year, probably the best offense they have faced is Texas Tech. And even them, like, they rely on the run game. They rely on Taj Brooks a lot. So they haven't really faced a passing attack quite like No Fafita and Tetairoa McMillan. They're all in on TCU's passing defense being fool's gold, which
interesting.
I found very interesting. And, Tetairoa McMillan, he's closing in on history right now. He's 112 yards away from becoming Arizona's all-time receiver. Maybe he gets that record in this game. Like, it's conceivable for T-Mac to get 112 yards and pass his wide receivers coach Bobby Wade for that Arizona record.
That's not that much for him.
No.
No.
We've seen him
that
put
is
up
definitely doable.
Yeah, we've seen him put up over 200 yards, over 300 yards in a game. So he could do that. But I agree with you, Lev. I think that this has to be a game. Get T-Mac involved, right? If Arizona is able to get T-Mac out in the open and make plays, that is a plus for Arizona. But I think the key for the Wildcats in this game is, man, you got to dominate time of possession. Like, you have to figure out a way to get Josh Hoover and all those wide receivers that they have on that side of the ball to get them to just be chilling on the sideline. Easier said than done. Arizona has not really done that this season, but If you can figure out a way to put up a masterclass rushing attack, I feel like that is the path to victory for the Wildcats. But it all has to start up front with this offensive line. Maybe they have found some stability with Joey Capra at right tackle. He did struggle in pass protection. Will be interesting to see how he fixes that. But I think Quali Conley, Kedrick Reesano, this has to be the best performances that these guys have played together as an Arizona Wildcat if Arizona wants a chance to win this game.
Yeah, I don't think Joey Capra will be intimidated or nervous. I think his 5th or 6th year of college football. He's been training to become an EMT. So, he's dealing with real life emergencies and trauma. I don't think, playing in front of 45,000 loud football fans will shake him up very much, but he does need to perform better. They probably need to give him some help. Tackle is not his natural position by any stretch. He was brought in here to be a center or guard. And they've just kind of, gone through all the options at that right tackle position after moving Jonas Sava-Anaya from there to left tackle. The offensive line has been problematic, to say the least, for Arizona for most of the season. They've really been victims of attrition, starting with Raymond Pulido, not playing for personal reasons after spring ball, to Leif Magnuson having a concussion that's knocked him out, probably, possibly ending his football playing days. And then promising redshirt freshman Rhino Tapatotai, who was doing pretty well at left tackle considering his lack of experience. He's out for the season and just had surgery. So, they didn't have great depth to begin with. As we were all sitting there watching training camp, every single practice, we're all there. I mean, what was one of the primary talking points, Justin? It was, if they lose one of their tackles, they're in trouble. And it turned out to be true.
Yeah. And like Pulido, Leif Magnuson, those are 2 starters that are out of the equation. And losing
Rhino, I think, would have been the 6th man.
Yeah, Rhino should be a guy that's stepping in for the injured guys. He gets thrusted into a leadership role, and then he gets taken out of the equation. So it's been a bad hand dealt to Josh Oglesby, the offensive line coach, who's just kind of trying to make chicken salad right now, just trying to put the pieces together and figure out what works. But there is a path to victory, Lev. There is a path to victory for Arizona. But TCU, on the other hand, they're having kind of a weird season because, after starting 2-0, they're 4-4. They've been really up and down. It seems like they win a couple, then they lose a couple. I don't really know how to gauge this TCU team, but what I do know is they got a really good offense. Josh Hoover is a great quarterback who throws a lot of touchdowns. They have a lot of weapons on that side of the ball. And Sonny Dykes, who is of the former Arizona offensive coordinator, a guy who is all about the air raid. He's been calling offenses for a long, long time now. So I expect play calling. I expect TCU to be well coached in this game. But, man, Arizona's defense has to get after these guys. And a game after they had, a few takeaways with Genesis Smith being outstanding, getting a forced fumble. There was interception there as well. I think after a game with takeaways, they have to figure out a way to continue to get those takeaways. And the offense, they can't stall out like they did against Houston. You can maybe afford to have 4 3-and-outs against Houston and win. You can't do that against TCU, because one thing about TCU is that no matter whether or not they're up by 14 or down by 14, they're going to sling the football. They are not a running football team. As a matter of fact, they're so bad at running. I think their best rusher is their wide receiver and Savion. So I think Arizona has to capitalize on offense and really make this a track meet, because if they stall out, I think that's going to be curtains in Fort Worth.
So TCU has won a game 35-34 over Texas Tech and lost a game 35-34 against UCF. They gave up 66 points in a loss to SMU, a game in which Sonny Dykes was ejected for arguing calls. They also lost at home to Houston 30-19, which, after what we saw from Houston the other night, seems like impossible.
How?
Like, how could that happen?
How do they beat Kansas State?
So, I don't think that like the unpredictability of the Big 12 or the kind of up and down nature of some of these teams is something you can bank on, but it does at least leave open the possibility of something wacky and unexpected happening.
Yeah. All right, we will look more in depth on that Arizona-TCU game coming up here in just a little bit. Let's dive right into Big 12 Bonanza. Lev, what's the latest with our standings?
So before we did our podcast last week, Justin was feeling good, said he had a good grasp, felt like he had a good grasp on things, and then he went 2-4 against the spread.
Humble pie, baby.
There we
Tastes
go.
good.
Yeah, I feel really good about this week, so I'm probably in trouble. I was 3-3, including picking Kansas to win outright at BYU. Thank you very much. And then Brett had a nice, Brett Farah, our former sports editor, who's been making picks with us all year. He had a nice bounce back week. He went 4-2 against the spread. So season standings, I am 43, 38-1. You and Brett are both 40, 41-1. Straight up, Brett and I are 49-33. Justin is 45-37. So there you have it. Yep. Okay. There's still time, Justin. We got a full slate. We got 8 games on Saturday. No bye weeks. I think we're done with the bye weeks. Everyone had 2 bye weeks this season, which I think is great.
Yep.
I'd love for that to be a permanent feature. We will skip over the first game of the day, which is Arizona-TCU, and we will head to Stillwater, Texas Tech at Oklahoma State. This game is on ESPN Plus, as is the Arizona game. 1:30 p.m. kickoff in Arizona. Texas Tech is giving 3.5 points on the road against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State has not won a game in the Big 12. The last time they went through a conference season without winning a game was 1994. So it has been a minute. Texas Tech, you mentioned it earlier. I mean, they're first in the league in scoring offense. And then you have Oklahoma State, which is last in the league in total defense. That is not a great combination on paper for the Cowboys. They're also last in rushing defense and going up against Taj Brooks. I'm going to toss a lot of stats out during this podcast today, and then I'm just going to go the other way, going on vibes and feelings. No way does Mike Gundy go through an entire Big 12 season without a win. They will not win their last game, which is at Colorado the day after Thanksgiving, but they will win this game outright. I am taking Oklahoma State despite whatever the numbers say.
Yeah, this is a senior day for them. They have a handful of seniors that have done really well at Oklahoma State, but this season obviously has not lived up to the expectations. So I think in Ollie Gordon's last game in Stillwater, for a lot of these guys, it's going to be a memorable afternoon. I can't believe I'm doing this because I said a couple weeks ago I'm tired of picking Oklahoma State. I've been banking on them to upset a lot of teams this year. They have not done that. Let's do it again. I can't believe I'm doing this, but let's go Oklahoma State.
They did beat the spread in that game against BYU. Nearly won the game, and you had picked Oklahoma State to win outright. So good teams win, great teams cover, right? Speaking of BYU, there are really 2 marquee games this Saturday, and this is one of them. BYU, number 14 in the country, at ASU, which is number 21 in the country, and red hot. This game is at Tempe. It is on ESPN. It is also in that 1:30 p.m. window, and BYU is getting points. ASU is favored. That's how much things have swung. When you look at these teams, Justin, they've both been really good in one-score games. ASU is 5-1 in one-score games. BYU 4-1. The first loss being this past week against Kansas. We talked about that game on the last podcast. BYU is second in the league in scoring defense. They are first in the league in total defense. People don't talk about that very much. They're the only team that is holding opponents under 5.0 yards per play. They will, obviously try to stop the run. That'll be the first priority, limiting what Cameron Scatabo can do. But ASU have the 4th most efficient quarterback in the conference in Sam Leavitt. They have a really good wide receiver in Jordan Tyson, who's tied for the league lead with 9 touchdowns. I feel like this ASU team is very similar to last year's Arizona team.
Yep.
I am riding the wave of momentum, and I am taking the Sun Devils to beat BYU, pretty much eliminating BYU, not eliminating, but really putting BYU in a precarious position to make the conference title game and giving ASU a real shot to get there.
This was supposed to be the Bourget Bowl. Trayson Bourget versus Trenton Bourget. Both of them will be on the sidelines for this game, but man, this is going to be a lot of fun. College game day should be in Tempe for this game. College game day, like this, all eyes should be on ASU and BYU this week. But
where is college game day this week? Do we know this?
Oh man, probably maybe in SEC country. I have no idea where college game day is, but they should be in Tempe for the first time since I think 2005. But I think that this game will go down to ASU.
Oh, they're in Columbus, Indiana, Ohio State.
Oh yeah, okay, I get it.
Yeah,
big year. For
not on their network, but it is kind of the biggest game of the day. So
hold on, real quick. I know we're digressing here a little bit. I actually asked John Wilner this question, Lev, on the air. Because I asked him, like, how would you rank Big 12 Coach of the Year prospects right now? Because you would have to say Kenny Dillingham is probably number one. Kalani Sitake, number two. Dion, three.
I think it depends on how these last couple of weeks play out. Those are the three that are in contention. If BYU wins out, I think it's Sitake. If Colorado wins out, I think it's Dion. If ASU wins out, I think it's Kenny. So, and I don't know when the voting takes place either. I don't know if it's before or after the conference championship game, which is, usually whoever wins the conference, they get it. But all three of these teams were underdogs heading into the season. So it's not like, Kansas State or Utah, they were expected to win and they did. You're not as likely to pick them. So great question. I think it depends on what happens.
Well, and Wilner said those three guys could be up for National Coach of the Year if you think about expectations and all that. But Kurt Cignetti at Indiana, again, I think he's probably got that locked up. But anyways, going back to my pick, I'm a sucker for a good storyline. I am manifesting Arizona beating TCU, which maybe is foreshadowing my pick later on in the podcast, to set up a territorial cup game with stakes. I'm talking about
I like it. Yep.
Arizona keeping ASU out of the Big 12 championship and ultimately the CFP, and in the process punching their ticket to a bowl game. And ASU, they can get to the Big 12 championship game, kind of get revenge on that 2014 Territorial Cup game on the Wildcats where they punched their ticket to the conference championship. So 10 years later, maybe ASU gets their revenge, keeps Arizona from going to a bowl game too. Like, I'm all in on this Territorial Cup game having some pretty high stakes. So I'm going with ASU at home. I like the Sun Devils to get it done. And I like a big game from Cam Scatterbo.
Yeah. So Justin's taking ASU. Brett is taking BYU. I think I forgot to mention he's taking Texas Tech in the other game. So he's going against us 2 in a row here, which we like, right? We don't like it when we have consensus. That usually is a recipe for defeat for all of us. Okay, the other marquee game of the day. I wish these games weren't so tightly bunched on the calendar, honestly, because we won't be able to see them because they're going on the same time as our game. This is Colorado at Kansas. Colorado is ranked 16th in the country. This game is on Fox. It's also at 1:30 p.m. It's at Arrowhead Stadium, the temporary home of the Kansas Jayhawks. Colorado is red hot. As we know, they have won 4 in a row. Their last loss was against Kansas State by 3 points at home in the game that I attended a few weeks ago. Kansas is the team that no one wants to play right now. They've won 3 of their last 4. Their only loss also against Kansas State by 2 points. Kansas State's had a really weird year, like really, really weird. Couple matchup things in this one to keep in mind. The Colorado has the most sacks, and they've allowed the most sacks. Kansas has allowed the fewest sacks in the league this year, and they have the 3rd most sacks. So keep an eye on how the quarterbacks are being protected in this game. I had a really tough time with this one, probably the toughest of any of the games in my view to pick. I'm like scared if I'm Colorado of facing this red hot, well-coached Kansas team that is in a similar situation to Arizona, trying desperately to make a bowl game, playing extremely well on both sides of the ball. But I am going to stick with Colorado. 3 points is the spread. I think they can beat Kansas and continue their march toward the Big 12 championship game and a spot in the college football playoff.
I got Colorado by a couple of touchdowns too. I think
couple touchdowns.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not trying to discredit Kansas for their win, big win, but they had to have a little bit of luck there towards the end. I think their luck runs out against Colorado. I like the Buffaloes to continue their path to the Big 12 championship game, and Colorado and ASU. Those are the two teams that I like to be in the Big 12 championship game.
Brett is also taking Colorado. So that one is our first clean sweep of the week. Okay, one more 1:30 game. This is UCF at West Virginia. This game's on ESPNU. The Knights are actually favored in this game by 3 points, which I find a little bit surprising. But then you look at some of the numbers, and West Virginia, they're 14th in the league in scoring defense. UCF is first in total offense. West Virginia is 14th in total defense. UCF runs the ball extremely well. We saw that firsthand. Yep. They're first in the league in rushing offense. West Virginia is bad at third down defense. They're last in the league. They're also bad in red zone defense. But I will say they got blown out against Baylor, but actually outgained Baylor. Okay, so that's good. And they are also in a situation where they're at home. It's senior day, emotional edge for the Mountaineers. They've actually had, I would say, like some really tough luck losses this season. Some games that you could have easily gone the other way. Like they should have beaten Pittsburgh in week 2, for one example. So despite all the numbers, I'm going to go again with the vibes and the emotion and getting points and taking West Virginia to win with the 3.
You said 14th in total defense.
Oh yeah,
for West Virginia.
There's a lot of bad West Virginia defensive numbers out there.
And UCF runs the hell out of the football. RJ Harvey is, in my opinion, the best running back in the league right now, which has a lot of great running backs.
It sure
There's
does.
a lot of good backs in this league, but RJ Harvey kind of right there at the top. So I'm expecting him to have a big game. I'm going with the Knights to win and cover.
Okay. Brett is also taking UCF in that one. Okay. Going to 5:00. Fox Sports 1 has Baylor at Houston. Baylor is favored by 8 points on the road. To me, the best thing that Houston has going for it in this game is their uniforms. They're wearing their like sort of Houston Oiler-esque, like light blue and red, like really sharp. They're calling them Houston Blues. They're outstanding. There's nothing else I really like about the Houston team right now. I know they've had a promising second half, but man, we saw last Friday night just how one-dimensional they can be. And Baylor is really rolling. They have saved Dave Aranda's job. That's pretty much official at this point. They have qualified for a bowl game. Their offense is really good, second in the league in scoring. And we know that Houston is last in most offensive categories. Bryson Washington had an amazing game last week against West Virginia, 18 for 123 and 3 touchdowns. Sawyer Robertson really emerging as one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. He has a 20-4 touchdown to interception ratio. I'm laying the 8 points here, Justin. I'm taking Baylor.
Yeah, Baylor's way too hot right now. Houston, I don't know what to expect out of them. They're kind of like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. They're either going to look bad against Houston or they're going to beat a really good TCU team or beat a really good Kansas State team. So I think that Houston may play Baylor much better than how they played against Arizona, but I got to go with a hot hand at this point. Give me the Bears.
To win and cover?
To win and cover, yes.
All right. Brett is also taking Baylor to win and cover. Okay. 5:30 p.m. Iowa State, number 22 in the country, favored by when we sent out the picks by 7.5 at Utah. It's since gone down to 7. So you might be able to get Iowa State at 7 or less. This game is on Big Fox in Salt Lake City. Never thought we'd see the day when Utah would be in the situation that they're in right now, losing as many games in a row as they have. But they're still like really good on defense. despite it all, when you look at like all the rankings, they're right up there, at or near the top in most significant statistical categories. I am again going to go with the emotional angle here. This could be Kyle Whittingham's last game, or he might go to the team before the game and say, "Hey, I'm coming back next year." Either way, that is a big psychological boost for the Utes. Similar to what's going on with Oklahoma State, I just can't see Utah like losing out this season. So I'm going to take the Utes to not only cover, but win outright.
And what the hell's happened with Iowa State? Remember the start that they were on, and we were thinking, hey, this might be the team that represents the Big 12.
Yeah, they're still alive. They only have 2 losses. They bounced back against Cincinnati last week. Losing at home to Texas Tech, that was the one that really was crushing for them. But when you look at the standings, I mean, they're one of only 4 teams that have 2 losses or less in the league. Yeah. So they're still alive. They have a path to get this done. I think Utah is going to play the role of spoiler. What say you?
I don't know what the hell happened to Iowa State, but just for the sake of picks, because we're getting down to the final weeks, I'm going with Iowa State.
So is Brett. He's taking the Cyclones. I understand the logic too, because Utah's been so bad on offense. But if Iowa State has one vulnerability on defense, it is the run. They're first in the league in pass defense and 15th in rush defense. So if Utah can get their running game going, I feel like they would have a chance. All right. Last game of the day before we get to our game. This is Cincinnati at Kansas State. This game is at 6:00. It is on ESPN2. And Cincinnati's getting 9 points on the road in this one. I think we were on the same page with this, Justin. We both thought Kansas State was the best team in the league after, about halfway through the season. And they have just had some mystifying setbacks since then. I just don't really understand what's going on with them. So I did a little bit of digging. If they outgained both Houston and ASU in their last 2 games, both losses, but they lost the turnover battle. And that is really what has done in the other Wildcats this season. If you look at their 3 losses, they are -6 in those games. So if Kansas State can take care of the ball better, which I'm sure has been a huge point of emphasis, they can probably win this game. But I just can't trust them to cover this many points. Cincinnati is just kind of tough and gritty, type of team that hangs around a lot. So I'm going to take Kansas State to win and end their little losing streak, but I'm going to take those 9 points and say that the Bearcats cover.
Is it senior day at Bill Snyder Stadium?
Is it senior day? It is indeed. Yes.
Okay.
Farmageddon the following week is in Ames.
Okay. So, do they overlook Cincinnati and look ahead to that Iowa State game? I don't think so, just because Kansas State has looked bad. I think that this is kind of a get-right game for them. The thing about that contest against ASU was even in moments when Kansas State would move the football and get to the other side of the field, something would happen, whether it was a turnover or turnover on downs. Like Kansas State was really riding the struggle bus against ASU.
They were down 24-0 at home in that game. Stunning.
And you felt like, hey, maybe they might get a comeback and spark it, but ASU did a really great job of really putting their foot on Kansas State's throat. So I think in a bounce-back game, I'm going with Kansas State to win and cover. I think senior day at Bill Snyder Stadium, we always talk about the emotions. Kansas State right now is fighting for their CFP lives, right? Are they at 2 losses or 3 losses right now?
They're at 3.
Oh, never mind.
But I mean, there's 9 teams that are still technically alive. So you never know what can happen. I think they're very much outsiders at this point.
I think
there's still a possibility.
I think they win this week, maybe lose Farmageddon, and your Alamo Bowl representative is the Kansas State Wildcats.
All right. Brett is also taking Kansas State to win and cover. That brings us to the finale of the day, which is actually the first game of the day. This is Arizona at TCU. This game is on ESPN Plus. This game kicks off at 1 o'clock Arizona time, 2 o'clock in Texas. And Arizona is getting 11.5 points in this game. It feels like the odds makers have finally adjusted a little bit to the state of affairs with the Wildcats. Matchup to watch in this game, Takario Davis against Jack Besh, who is an LSU transfer. He is second in the league in receiving yards. He is also tied for first in receiving touchdowns with 9. You know who's ahead of him in receiving yards? That would be Mr. Tetaroa McMillan. Josh Hoover, very productive quarterback, can turn the ball over at times. He is a 22-8 touchdown to interception ratio, 67.7% completion rate, 323.3 yards per game. Very good. To give you a contrast between TCU and Houston last or near the bottom in almost every offensive category. Meanwhile, TCU is 4th in scoring offense, 3rd in total offense, 1st in passing offense, and 4th in third down offense. So, like, you got to really, if you're the Arizona defense, you've got to really shift gears in terms of, strategic thoughts. Like, we got to defend the pass. We can't just crowd the line of scrimmage. Can't just, hope to get the other team in third and long situations, because TCU, they're still comfortable in those spots. But the constant needs to be effort, right? Better tackling. TCU, I am sure, is going to stretch Arizona from sideline to sideline, right? So they've got to take, and they talked about this when we met with some of the players this week, like tackling angles have to be really good, and population to the football. Even though it is a different style of offense, these are tenets that you can take into any game and give you a better defensive performance. I am going to take TCU to win this game. I do not see Arizona winning, but I will take the 11.5 points, because I would like to think that this team is a little bit more mature than it was earlier in the season, that they've adjusted to some of the personnel losses. TCU, very up and down. You kind of never know what you're going to get from them. So give me TCU to win and Arizona to beat the 11.5 point spread.
I'm going with the upset. I'm manifesting the big territorial cup game. I need this to happen.
This is the sole reason you're doing this, isn't it?
Yes. I need this to happen. So I'm going with the territorial cup game with high stakes, Arizona versus ASU. If Arizona beats ASU, they get to a bowl game. If ASU wins, then they get to a CFP and prevent Arizona from getting to a bowl game. So give me the territorial cup showdown next week in Tucson. I can't wait for that. But I think, honestly, the takeaways come in bunches. Maybe that comes in another game for the Wildcats. So forced fumbles. Arizona right now is 3rd in the Big 12 when it comes to forced fumbles. So even if they don't get interceptions, I expect them to punch the ball out and create takeaways. But now it has to be Noah Fafita, Tetaroa McMillan, that offense's job to put points on the board and not stall out, because we've seen when the offense stalls on the road, they really dig themselves a hole. And they also can't afford to turn over the ball too, because if you look at, some of these road matchups, like, against UCF, they had a fumble by Quali Conley in that first half. That then turned into a touchdown for the Knights. Next thing you know, UCF is up by 14 points, and Arizona, they can't run the football. Now they have to start to throw the ball. BYU to start the second half. I mean, Arizona was right there in that game, and then 2 straight possessions to start the second half started that avalanche for the Wildcats. They were unable to get out of it. So I think the number one stat for Arizona going into this game, you have to take care of the football. And you also have to force some takeaways too. If they can win the turnover battle in this game, I think Arizona has a fighter's chance. And, we've seen TCU show vulnerability this season. So, heck, I'm going with Arizona to stick it to their old offensive coordinator in Sonny Dykes, and I got the Wildcats winning. And maybe this is a game where Takario Davis gets an interception, Michael Lev.
That'd be something. Takario, not necessarily known for his sure hands. Gets a lot of pass breakups, doesn't get a lot of picks. Brett is also with me on this one. He is taking TCU to win, but U of A to cover. I said earlier that the team needs to show up for this one. I should add that the offense really needs to show up, because this is
Yes.
just not going to be like a 17-13 type of game. It just isn't. You're going to have to probably get at least 27 points, I'd say, to win this game, maybe more. We haven't seen a lot of evidence of that, but maybe, some of the tweaks they made last week, spreading the field a little bit more themselves, Noah Fafita getting the ball out quicker. Maybe these things will help them. The running game showed up big time in the second half against Houston. Maybe that will carry over. It should be an interesting one, to be sure. I'm very hopeful that it is a competitive game, because that UCF game was like no fun. After about 5 minutes, it's like, this is over, and now we got to sit here for 3 hours watching this debacle. Cannot have that again. And if they did have something like that again, be on standby on Sunday, because that's the type of performance that could lead to something drastic happening.
All I'm saying, last time Arizona was in Texas, turned out well for them. Alamo Bowl.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. Love them some Texas. All right. Arizona versus TCU, 1:00 kickoff on ESPN Plus. You can stream it there. You can find all of our coverage on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster mobile app. We appreciate you guys for listening and watching. And for other coverage happening this weekend in Tucson, we got El Tour de Tucson happening Saturday morning. Lots of great coverage there. Arizona women's basketball coming off their loss to NAU. We'll see how they bounce back. And then Arizona men's basketball against Duke. Tucson Roadrunners are also in town too. So plenty happening in the sports scene in Tucson, Arizona. Find all that coverage on Tucson.com.